We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to the show. It is Toward Anarchy. I am your host, Michael Storm. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. And, man, have we got a great one for you today. My guest will be the neo-sage himself, Larry Sharpe, coming up here in just about half an hour. So until then, we'll give you some of the usual nonsense and silliness that I am used to delivering every Sunday. It is Sunday. It's cold across most of America. I hear it's a heat wave in Texas compared to where I am here in Topeka in the middle of the nation. It's very, very cold. Let's see. I don't know what it was the last time I looked, but let's see. Producer Ken says it's 25 where he's at. It's 4 degrees in Topeka right now, according to my phone. And, you know, I mean, I have to trust it. It's the most important thing in the world, right? My CIA tracking device, my information programming device. It sends me all my important information in the world, and I have to share some of that with you. I'm going to hold it right here and not skip on that because I've been it's something I do every once in a while. I go through and I will read some screenshots of titles of articles and things that I've come across during the week, and I haven't done it in a while, and it never goes really well because I always get sidetracked talking about something in it. But there was a number of things that I had been making it a point to capture here recently and wanted to talk about. So I'll do that, but right now, get the basics out of the way, the important stuff. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Go to towardanarchy.com if you want to follow along. As always, I've shared the links there for you. If you just look for today's show, it's February 14th. If you have to go into the archive, just click the archive. I didn't trick myself again and not put it up there while I'm actually doing the live show and wait until later to put it up. It's actually there right now in real time if you're with me. Look for February 14th. You'll see Larry Sharpe. He wears a lot of hats as an executive. Okay, so let me get this out of the way because this is something that I ran into all week as I was advertising, promoting, talking about the idea that Larry was going to be on the show. And, of course, he's a political candidate. He's a big L libertarian as well as a little L libertarian. And so to many people, he's just a statist, especially some of the people that run in my circles or the circles that I run in, whatever. He's just a statist, but you have to admit he's not a very good one. Okay, and I mean that with all due sincerity and love and respect, and I mean it as a positive thing. I mean that he's not a good statist. He believes in liberty and truth and minimal government and voluntarism and these concepts, and we'll have to ask him, how much he believes using politics, using the state as a tool to change things is viable versus him using his runs for gubernatorial office or something like that to bring attention to the ideas of voluntarism, libertarianism, the non-aggression principle of these things. We'll have to ask him about that. We will make it a point. But like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening to us on. And if you go to towardanarchy.com, look for the flashing consume over the T-shirt and buy a T-shirt and help support the show. Visit the neosage.com to learn more about what Larry does, and we'll find out. He does it. He, like I say, wears a lot of hats. He's an executive, a speaker, a coach, a consultant, and of course, for our purposes, he's a libertarian-minded philosopher. And so we'll talk to him about politics in the future and things that are going on right now. We'll talk to him. We'll ask him about the vaccine. Anything that pops up, whatever we can get in there. You can also follow Larry on Facebook. It's facebook.com/neosage, Neosage, Neosage, and that's just the easiest way to follow him. I follow him there as well. I also, as always, have shared a couple of extra links for you. I want to make sure to mention them because they're things that are coming up, and they have to do with stuff that's going on. Over the last year, we've lost a lot of liberty. We've lost a lot of freedoms. We've lost the right to travel. We've lost these things were always in question anyway. We're losing the right to free speech. You can't speak out in sort of public forums without it costing you. It's happened to me in just a minor sense, but it happened again this week to somebody I because I'm a fan of the Star Wars universe and I follow it wherever it goes. It's landed me at Disney. Marvel, unfortunately, the same way. Whatever. I'm not big on this idea of I have to cancel my Disney Plus because they don't do what I think they should do politically. That's just not the way this works. I won't be canceling my Disney Plus. I want to watch the show even if Cara Dune isn't in it. Gina Carano, I told you about this months ago. We've been following the story, and so I figure may as well follow up on it, even if it's in everybody else's sites. It wasn't necessarily months ago when I was talking about it. When this hunt to get her fired, this social justice warrior move to get her canceled, it finally. It came to fruition over the last week, and Disney fired her for her social media posts. And I shared a link there, and it's a link to the New York Post article about it, and they captured the tweets and put the tweets in there, and I've read through them, and I've read through them again and again, and I don't find anything particularly offensive. It's certainly not. I guess it just doesn't matter to me because I'm not gay, I'm not a cross-dresser, I'm not one of these other weird things, I guess. And that's the problem, is that because somebody might term them as weird or different or as something that they don't understand or that they don't get, automatically they hate them. And it's just not true. I fall into this category. Gina Carano, she's considered sort of a right-wing. She's one of these people that's being targeted for so-called conservative views, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. It is and it isn't. She definitely falls into that category, but if so, it's sort of milquetoast conservatism at that. It's not like she's hardcore right in any sense, but she's shared the Jeffrey Epstein memes and some things like that. So those are definitely attached to right-wing. Conservative, far right, conservative conspiracies. So whether and I'm not far right, except that I accept some of these things as well. And so it would be very easy to lump me into that category if that's all that you look at. And that's what happens when these people do this. So the tweets, when they attack somebody like this, the tweets are there for you to see for yourself. She landed on her feet. She's immediately going to be doing a movie with one of the big media groups, one of the whatever right-wing media groups. They're doing something. She has a movie that she's going to star in and direct, and I'm happy for her. I don't care about her absence from The Mandalorian at all because they turned her into a cop. They literally handed her a badge. Well, okay, they set it down, and she apparently picked it up at some point and made herself sort of sheriff of the town. And it wasn't a voluntary, it wasn't like the people came to her and said, hey, you be the sheriff. It was the Republic, the future empire. It was these... it was people in X-wings, the police. If you aren't watching The Mandalorian, you don't know that at the time period they act as police. Certainly for sectors, the Republic, they act as police for any place that they consider one of their properties, one of the sectors of space or the galaxy that they are not imperial, I guess. They're out there, they're patrols, and they act as policemen, and they literally had this badge, and they left it with her at one point, and apparently she picked it up and decided to become this cop instead of what she was a former. She was a trooper. She was an actual field trooper, a heavy trooper, and she left the Empire and didn't purposely go side with the Republic because of I assume the understanding that a lot of us have, the understanding that you certainly would get from this show, is that it's just another form of authoritarianism, that there's not any legitimacy to the authority other than they exercise it. And that's where we sort of exist in reality today, that authority it's not a real thing. It's just something that people assume and other people accept. And so things like our natural right and all these things that we talk about on the show, they become victims of that the culture, the society, that government that has grown up around these ideologies, whether they're successful or not. America is such a perfect example of it. You should be able to see it. It's so recent, it's so early in its understanding, and it's such a basic concept that the individual is free to determine their own reality, and that government is there to participate in, and it's there to be subservient to the individual. And that's not the case. So you should be able to look at it just right there in front of your face and see it, except it's so obscured, and I guess that's why we have to have these conversations, so that you can expose people to some of these ideas, and that they can eventually catch it, grasp it, because it's a really insidious thing. You don't want to think that the government is completely criminal, that every single person that gets involved in it is, and it's ridiculous to suggest that they are. They're not. There are people that believe that they actually can do some good, but the problem is that the system itself is broken. The whole notion that it's okay for a small number of people, even if it's a, quote, majority of people, to decide what everyone else can and can't do with their health and their wealth and their lives, is a faulty premise to build something on to begin with. And so if just the fact that you continue it, that you perpetuate it throughout time, doesn't change it. It doesn't make it any different. I fail to see why it's so hard to understand, and why it's so hard for some people to grasp, except for out of fear, out of arrogance, out of a need to suggest that people can be controlled, that you can provide a perfect environment even for people who don't consider it a perfect environment and don't want to be there. It's a weird thing. It's a weird understanding to live in my head and grasp that every single man is free and owing to no other. And that by virtue of his birth, this is not changed by the fact that he's born in some particular section of the world, that this group of people. How does that work? Do you yourself want to be born? Let's just imagine that it's not a good society, that it's not America, that it's not free. Do you want to have to be beholden to an ideology of a state or of a people just because you were born there? And then they make it almost impossible for you to leave or to participate in any other way that isn't through that control system? You get that? It's a weird thing to live in that space. Larry Sharpe's just telling me right now that he's here and ready to go, so we'll add him to the conversation in just about 15 minutes. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm not a huge follower of his work, just across the social media, and I see his posts occasionally and about the things that he's doing. But it was one of these things where I go out to the fans, the friends, the people that are listening to the show that I can never thank and can never name all of you, even though I know some of you by name. I went and I asked and I said, who am I not talking to? Who do I need to talk to? What topics am I not covering? What, even though I'm trying to have an open mind and bring everything that I just can't be everything to everyone, and I can't have my mind on every single topic and every single idea and what every person is up to and who might be best to talk to about every little thing. And so I reach out and the people say, well, you should talk to this person about this, and you should talk to this person about this. And one of the names that has come up repeatedly when I've done that, when I've asked, is Larry Sharpe. So it's a real pleasure to get him onto the show, and we'll have him in here in just about 15 minutes. And we'll talk about all of these things that are going on. I shared a quote, as always, towardanarchy.com. Like, share, follow, subscribe. That's the mantra. I shared this quote: if what is best in mankind and what its progress depends on manifests itself primarily in the individual and only secondarily in the mass, as I often argue, then our objective should be to maintain such freedom as allows the individual to think and speak for himself. And act for himself, not just to think and speak for himself. He should be to act for himself, too. If he thinks something and speaks something, he should be able to act on it. And there should be no question of any authority or any interference from assumed authority or approved of authority, agreed upon authority, when there is no violation of an individual, when there's no claim of property or damage to someone, when there's no crime. Louis J. Hale Jr. said that, and I'm not familiar with him. It was kind of weird, one of those things that just continues to prove over the last 20 years that I see these things and I absorb just their reality, and that's it. And I just live in the moment, and I live in my reality as I accept it, because that was a quote that I went and pulled from my database of about 500 quotes that I built up years ago. It was something that I shared on one of the first Liberty websites that I built circa 1998 when I would have started it, I guess. So it's been 24, almost 25 years that I had been doing this. It might have been a little sooner than that. I mean, the web wasn't much older than that, the internet as you know it. So to even be there in 1998 with a full-on website, there was only a handful of us up there at the time. There was Lou Rockwell and some other people like that out there, just trying to find a way to get a little bit of a message of liberty across to people using this wonderful new tool where you could actually link to other ideas and information and stories to support anything that you claimed on your website. So I love being able to do this same sort of thing all these years later and have the towardanarchy.com website, because it's been a process. I found some business cards. I've kept at least one of each business card as I've progressed through my iterations of the show. I say this show because that's where it's landed. So it's been various iterations of it, working with other people, working by myself, hosting my own network, being hosted here on this network years ago, and then back on Republic Broadcasting Network now today. It's a full circle thing, so it's really great when I say that it's a privilege to be able to do this and to bring just to have a conversation with Larry, just because I want to talk to him, but let you listen to it. It's really, really great for me. Let's spend these last few minutes before we bring Larry into the conversation. I know we'll go into this break. Okay, so Larry Sharpe awaits us in the wings, and we will chat with him in just a couple of minutes. We'll bring him in right after the next break here. And I wanted to do this because there's one thing in particular that's in these headlines that what I do is I'll be reading through headlines, just scrolling through the news or something, and I'll just snap a screenshot of it on my phone. And so these are all just in the gallery on my phone. And I do it all the time, and I go through and I delete them all the time, and I don't think about reading them, and I think about reading them, and I think, oh, that's important, that's not so important. But there's one thing that keeps coming up that is in my headlines, and we will get to them because I'm going to just read through them here until we get to the next break and bring Larry into the conversation. America's cities are in crisis. I don't do news cycle stuff, so I think doing this every once in a while is kind of it keeps me thinking about what other people are being told, and that's important. And this was from Time. America's cities are in crisis. They should be allowed to raise debt to save themselves. What a horrible, horrible notion, creating wealth out of debt. It just doesn't work. Let's see. American democracy is only 55 years old and hanging by a thread. That's from The Atlantic. An interesting idea that they believe that it's only 55 years old. And it's understandable because they're talking about this sort of black freedom in there as opposed to the nation itself, and that's why they say 55 instead of 200 or whatever. MasterCard will allow merchants to accept select cryptocurrencies on its network later this year. That's awesome. Jobless claims worse than expected as pandemic-related filing surge. At one point, yes, there's one that obviously I captured because this is something that I hit on every once in a while. I've been talking about this for years and years, and it just amazes me that so many people don't realize it and don't catch on to it. And that's this coverage of the jobless reports or the job reports every month and how they relate to any sort of reality, and the fact that they're manipulated multiple times throughout the year, and every single time they're worse than what they say they are. So it's a PR lie. It's manipulations in numbers. It's everything that we're going through right now with the vaccine. It's the usual nonsense. Prosecution rests saying if Trump is convicted, of course this was a couple of days ago, if Trump is not convicted, it sets a terrible standard, a new terrible standard. That the wording. A terrible new standard would be correct for presidential misconduct. And, well, of course, we know 2-0, the president on acquittals. Gina Carano canceled by the dark side of double standard. That was just the New York Post response to it, and that's my thoughts on it. That's a lot of people's thoughts on it, because if you go and look at Pedro Pascal, he's the Mandalorian, and so he worked with Gina Carano. And some of the things that he's posted, and other people that work for Disney. This particular woman was hunted down and targeted by social justice warriors. At least 9 dead. I don't know how this worked out. Maybe Ken knows the last of it. There's a horrible crash in the DFW area, and was it more than 100 cars? I don't know. Ken, I bet Ken knows more. That was an old headline. It said 9 dead in that accident. Another mention of Gina Carano being fired. Rioters try breaking down door of Portland Police Association. That's something that happened, and that's one of those things where somebody's going to point at it and call it 135 to 150 cars with 6 dead. That's crazy, that accident that happened in the DFW area. And it's one of those things that happens somewhere in America just about every year, some ridiculous 150 car pile up in the weather, and there's always a couple of diesel tractor trailers in there. But it's just, ooh, boy. And to me, I'm one of these guys that I've driven across the nation in the worst weather. It's horrible right now. I'll be out in it, unfortunately, later today, but I have things I have to do. I've driven through down I-70 in the middle of a blinding blizzard where you can't see more than just a couple of feet from in front of your car, and I've watched the cars drive off the road side and in front of me and slide into the ditch. I was driving up a mountain. I worked in the casinos and worked in the casino up in the mountains in Central City, actually Black Hawk. It was a little town outside Central City in Colorado. And I had to drive up there for that winter, basically 2 winters. I worked there for literally a year. And so 2 winters I went through driving up there. One there was this one day the guy, he just slid right off the road right into the side of the mountain. It was just the craziest thing I've ever. No, it was only the second craziest thing I've ever seen. The craziest thing I've ever seen is when I slid last year and put my PT Cruiser up on the Jersey barrier, just enough at an angle that I could barely crawl out of my door, and we were able to pull it off. Some guy just pulled up with his strap in his truck, and I said, man, just step on it and gun it, and we'll see what happens. I think it'll ride right back down the same way it went up, and it did. Larry Sharpe joins the conversation right here on Toward Anarchy next.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Grab your browser and go to towardanarchy.com. As always, I've shared the links there for you. With my guest today is Larry Sharpe. He wears a lot of hats. He's an executive, a speaker, a coach, a consultant, and, of course, for our purposes, he's a libertarian. He's a free-thinking, voluntarist type philosopher. It's funny because as I was promoting the show this week, of course, it gets promoted in a lot of places where they're anti-statist, and they're very hard on people who call themselves capital L libertarians for sure, and people who run for office. And I had to keep repeating myself. I said, yeah, I get it. He's a statist, I know, but he's not a very good statist. So it's my pleasure, and I mean that really, truly in the most positive of ways. It's really a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you, Larry. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you great. You sound good.
Awesome. I'm glad. Yes, I guess I'm not a good – that's a compliment. I'm not a good statist. Thank you.
You're welcome. No,
I wish more people would treat me that way. That'd be great.
Well, it's hard to be a good statist and actually believe that people can think and do things for themselves and to actually actively work for that.
Well, there's a difference between, being an activist or just being a member of the movement and being a candidate, and I consider myself a former candidate, maybe a future candidate. So I've got to think differently, right? I'm someone, and part of our movement, the liberty movement in general, needs to be better at divvying up what we do well and breaking ourselves up in different groups, right? I'm a former Marine, and you got your armor, your air, your infantry, and they all do different things. Your logistics, your amphib, they all do different things. And the part that I do is take the ideas and concepts of liberty movement and put them in to a way that the average voter will hear or understand or accept. And that's a different part of our movement.
I think that's great, and it was one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I'm of that mind too. I think that you certainly can use the political space as a platform to send a good message, even if there is very little hope of really changing the system. Even if you win a big seat, there's Dr. Paul spent sort of 30 years up there in Congress and really didn't change anything. He was known as the guy who stood up for individualism and stood up for liberty and things like the Constitution and limited government. But when you get down to it, he succeeded in opening a lot of eyes and opening a lot of minds, but he didn't change the system.
Well, there are a couple things, right? One of them is, remember, Ron Paul didn't win because he was a libertarian. That's not why he won the seat. And what I'm trying to achieve is to have someone actually win because they're libertarian. He won because he was a good man who was respected and loved in his community. He also happened to be someone who was a part of the liberty movement. But he didn't win because of that. He won because people in his community loved him, respected him, and knew him. That's why he won. And I'm not holding against him. In fact, the reverse. I think it's amazing that someone who thinks the way he thinks can also be those things. But that's why he won. I want us to move to the next level, which is having someone win because they are talking libertarian ideas, libertarian views, libertarian policies. That, I think, is the next step in the movement. And we're not doing that well. That's not what we're doing well. We're taking our chances at running and just spending our time being activists and talking about rhetoric, which rhetoric matters, but not when you're running as a candidate. As a candidate, we tell ourselves lies in the liberty movement all the time. And one of the lies we tell ourselves is everybody wants to be free. That's a lie. That's not true. We tell ourselves that in our own echo chambers all day long. I live in New York City. I know that's not true. The average, person, particularly those who live in cities, but the average American, because, again, most Americans now live in urban areas, if not actual cities, at least the suburbs of large cities, they would be happy with a benevolent dictator as long as it's their dictator and that their problems are solved, or at least they feel good about their problems. They would accept that. And we have to accept that as a reality of our nation and then act accordingly. And so what I do is I don't even talk about the liberty movement or libertarianism when I campaign. I talk about ideas of changing the way people think about things like taxation. I talk about ideas that will give us success that do not include force and do not include more taxes. Now, for many libertarians, that's not enough. But for the average New Yorker, that's mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And so I'm recruiting people to come towards us. And what I would like in my perfect world is the more hardcore libertarians. By the way, I'm one of the rare, more mainstream libertarians that is not saying, get rid of the anarchist. I'm the reverse. I think we have to have the hardcore people in our movement because they keep us pointing in the right direction. They are our North Star. But what I'd rather them do, and too many of them don't do this, some do, but too many, the second I bring in recruits, they get angry because they're not libertarian. And I'm saying, I'm bringing you recruits. Teach them. Make them more like us. If people stay with us for about a year, give or take, they do one of two things. They leave because it's not for them, or they become a whole lot more like us. And I would like us to be better as I bring recruits in to have us go, I got it, Larry. They're not perfect. I got you. We'll take it from here. And then I go out and bring my recruits in. But that's not happening as well as I'd like it to happen.
It's one of the bigger problems that we have as libertarians, as anarchists, as voluntarists. It's the emotional response. We're so invested in it. We're so certain that what we're doing is the right thing to do.
Yes.
And this is true of all the others as well. But this is
but
our
we're
problem.
Right. But we're right.
Yes. Exactly. And so often someone will ask us, oh, I did it the other day. It's been a little while longer than the other day now at this point, but this is one of these things that brought it to me, and it started to get me to rethink this emotional response that we constantly give. No matter how perfect it is to us, it lacks a detail, it lacks a subtlety for these people who are asking honest questions. And somebody asked me, well, what do you think about UBI? Well, taxation is theft. That's my emotional response to the answer. That didn't answer his question.
Correct, right? And my answer to UBI is, and this is how I start, I always remember that it's emotion, then logic, right? It's emotion, then logic. So the first thing I say is when I ask that question is I say, I get why people would want that. That actually makes sense. That feeling of wanting that safety net actually makes sense to me. Like I say I respect the feeling. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying I get it. Like I get why you would feel that way. And when I say that, they go, oh, really? I go, yeah. I said, look, I don't think it's the best answer because when you start to do that, then I begin to explain the downsides of it, the problems of it, right? And I go sometimes deep, sometimes not, depending on who they want to hear. And I then say instead, wouldn't it be better if we had a way that would allow people to kind of work their way out of poverty versus kind of getting stuck in almost a systemic kind of poverty? And when you speak like that, people go, yeah, that would be better. Now they hear me. Now I don't have to say taxation is theft. Now I don't have to say those things, and they'll actually hear me. If you'll let me indulge for a second, I'll give you one which I think is a very interesting thing that happened to me once. I was at an event in upstate New York, and a young lady, probably about 19 years old or so, was sitting at the event. It was in a diner. And she says to me after the event, she goes, Larry, I like what you said, but I think I'm a communist. And I said, okay. And there are libertarians around, so I basically got to put my foot at them and kick them away from her because they're ready to start tearing her apart, right? So I just go to her and I say, okay, I'm going to ask you a question if you're okay with it. She goes, yeah. I said, do you want to be a communist because you think you want things to be fair? And she went, yes, Larry, yes. I said, you know what, me too. I want things to be fair too. And she went, really? I went, yeah. I said, what do you think, like, what would be fair? In your view, would it be fair, like, if everybody got, say, a two-bedroom apartment or two-bedroom house? She went, oh, that'd be great. I said, I agree. That would be amazing. I said, let me go down the road if I could. If that happens, and what happens if this guy, and there were guys around us, and I pointed to a guy, what if he has 4 kids and I have no kids? What happens then? He's kind of struggling to squeeze people in his house. I got a guest room. What should we be doing then? She goes, well, I guess people should maybe like make it the house or something. And I said, you know what usually happens in any kind of communist or socialist environment? She said, what? I said, people with weapons, usually men with guns, but always people with weapons, will come by and they decide. And if I don't like the decision, I'm either going to a morgue or I'm going to a prison. One of those two. I said, I don't really like that. She goes, no, I don't like that either. I said, see, I think socialism and communism could probably work if you're okay with massive amounts of constant state-sponsored violence. Are you okay with that? She's like, no. I said, me either. I don't like that either. And all she said was, well, maybe I'm not a communist. And I was like, awesome. And I let it go.
That's a good start. I mean, boy, because if you get them to realize what that really means when you say, I want to be a communist, you can get them to realize a little bit how slippery the slope is, how important it is that we maintain the ideals that created this nation.
Yes, absolutely. And I learned some of this. You know, not everyone knows my background, but I was in the Marine Corps for 7 years in the 80s. And part of my time in the Marine Corps was in intelligence. And when I was in there, there was a story they told in one of the schools I was in, which was about an Army officer who was captured in the Korean War. And he told this story several years later, probably in the 70s or 80s, he told the story. He tells a story about when he was captured and then interrogated by a Chinese officer. The Chinese, for those of you who are listening who don't know, the Chinese actually, engaged and joined the North Koreans in the Korean War. So many Chinese soldiers and Chinese commissars were on the North Korean side. So he was captured and he's interrogated by a Chinese interrogator. Now this guy is the epitome of a West Point Army officer in the 50s. Guy from the New England, wealthy, exactly what you would imagine. And this officer is trying to tell him, this Chinese interrogator is trying to tell him how great communism is. And he literally tells the guy, look, what are you talking about? By the time I head back, this war's over, I'm going to my beautiful home, my beautiful place. I'm going back to something great. I'm never going to believe communism is right. He's like, no, I know. I don't think you can. He goes, all I need you to do is just think maybe your way isn't perfect. That's it. And I never forgot that. And I think that now. And I accept that capitalism is not perfect. That's the issue. I'm not an ideologue. I know that capitalism sometimes fails. If you don't have the right people, it will fail sometimes. However, it is still the absolute best system we have, hands down, no question. It's the best. Nobody's perfect. No system's perfect. But if you can find a better one, my ears are open. But there's no better one.
Well, that's why capitalism works, because it is the only word that describes the individual's natural right to determine his own economic future. It's the only word that people. I'll ask somebody that. Okay, they'll be talking about capitalism and say, "Oh, well, we need to do this. Capitalism is bad. It allows these businesses to grow so big, and all these false arguments about what capitalism is and what it's allowed to happen." And I'll talk to them and I'll say, "Well, then, what is the word? Tell me, what is that word that's out there that describes my right to decide for myself my own economic decisions, whether it be how much money I want to make, what job where I spend it, whatever it is, whatever those economic decisions." Well, they'll say to me, free market. And I say, well, no, that's just the idea that we all have that ability already and come together and exchange those things, those abilities, those tokens of wealth, whatever they are, with each other. That's not the word I'm looking for. And they cannot provide me another word because there isn't one. It's capitalism.
But there's two problems here. One of them is because of how our specifically two-party system, but our system in general, what it's done, it's turned capitalism into crony capitalism.
Yeah.
So particularly the youth, if you're under 30, right? Imagine if you're under 30 or even under 35, but in theory under 30. If you're under 30, what happened to you? I mean, you came out of college or high school right after the first crash. You busted your rump to try to get yourself back up and running. And now the second crash, COVID crash comes. The COVID response crash comes. So capitalism doesn't look great to you. And what do you see? Big businesses winning, right? This is because the government picked the winners and picked the losers. But you don't understand that. All you understand is, oh, this is what people call capitalism. And my friends who are angry because they can't own anything think capitalism sucks. So they see capitalism, and when you say the word, they don't actually feel capitalism. They don't feel what you just said. What they feel, their connotation from the word capitalism, is actually crony capitalism, which is horrible, which is government-sponsored, oligarchy, which is what we have now in too many places, and it's what they see. So the word kind of has lost some of its meaning, which is why I often don't say capitalism.
What's the word you use?
Yeah, when it comes to words like anarchy and things of that sort, the phrase I use is a voluntary society. People love that. How about a voluntary society? And they go, oh, that sounds great. It does. I just said anarchy. I just said free market. But that has a different connotation. When it comes to anything with the market or capitalism, I say consumer-driven. Because everyone responds to being a consumer. They don't think they're capitalists. They think they're slaves to the crony capitalist system. So it doesn't land for them. But when I say, how about we make a more consumer-driven society? They go, oh, that'd be great, because they're all consumers. Note, I'm constantly picking on the emotional aspect and the connotation of the phrases, because I'm trying to get people to vote for me. I'm not worried about the denotative answer. I'm not worried about the actual meaning of the word, because politics is not logical. Politics is emotional. So I work on the meaning of the word, on the emotional meaning of the word.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, we're getting ready to go into a break here. It's creeping up on us, but we'll have to come back and find out how successful you are at that, and what you've learned as you've gone through talking to different classes and different cultures of people, and who's responding to you and who isn't. Because I'm assuming, as a person of color yourself, that you have some insight to it.
I do, absolutely.
That's great, because it's something it's a topic that comes up a lot within the libertarian anarchist circles. Where are the people of color? Where are these other people? And they're out there. They're absolutely out there. And so to me, it becomes a matter of why aren't you finding them? It's not a case of they're not out there. Why aren't you finding them? Where is that voice? Who can we point it to? And who are they listening to and following? And that's what brought me to bring you on the show, because I would reach out to my fans and followers. I'd say, hey, who do you want to talk to? And they say, you got to get Larry Sharpe on the show. We'll come back and we'll continue the conversation with Larry Sharpe right here on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com, that's the place to follow along. And if you look for February 14th, you'll see that Larry Sharpe is my guest at neosage.com, or you can follow Larry on Facebook, facebook.com/neosage. And just before we went into the break, I was just asking him about the response, the feeling that he gets from people of other color, of other cultures, of different ideas other than the sort of standard milquetoast white approach that most political positions seem to present. As a libertarian, are you attracting those other people and bringing them into the fold? Is it as easy to do as it might seem it should be? I don't know if that's a weird thing to say.
No, not at all. Look, when I came on, I said I'll deal with anything. I don't have a problem with any question or any comment. I'm happy to do it.
Sure.
So let me go back to the most selfish piece, which is, if you want to look me up, please look me up on Sharpe Way, the Sharpe Way on all the Instagrams and the Facebooks and the YouTubes and all that stuff, or just LarrySharpe.com. You can just Google Larry Sharpe. That's Sharpe with an E, and the E stands for, I don't know, entertaining? I'll take that. Whatever, but Larry Sharpe with the E. Please do that. Lots of stuff. But I want to touch a couple pieces which kind of go back to what you mentioned earlier. You were talking about what's the word that says, what are my rights so that I can do what I want to do? And the problem that we often have is our rhetoric. The left's rhetoric, while their policies have not helped, their rhetoric, with the exception of the last 3 months or so, has been amazing. Their rhetoric is always about we're going to be fair, we're going to care about equal rights, we're going to care about everybody. That's amazing rhetoric. And to somebody who isn't paying attention, to somebody who is trying to just, get their life in order, and all you do is watch the TV show every once in a while, that's wonderful rhetoric. Democrats seem like they're great people. All they talk about is fairness and caring and giving, and you get free college. Oh, my God, right? Sounds great. To libertarians, we want to vomit. I get it. But to the average person, that sounds pretty good. Then when they come to the average libertarian, he or she says something like, yeah, but what about my rights? And they go, wow, that sounds selfish. Or states' rights. And if you're a person of color, you hear that as, oh, back to slavery.
Yeah.
Again, it goes right back to the connotative, the feeling of what we're saying. I know that our ideas are correct. There's no doubt. I wouldn't be a strong libertarian as I am if I didn't believe that. I wouldn't run for office as a libertarian if I didn't believe that. But I also know that our rhetoric, in many cases, just doesn't land right. I was at a solutionary event with Maj Touré in Atlanta over the summer. Yeah, over the summer. And we were talking about it. It was mostly black conservatives, black libertarians. There were some people who weren't black there, but it was heavily that, probably 80% that, 2A supporters. And the one thing that we all said, we kind of all agreed upon, was the reach out to the minority community is not very good. You've got to make it better. And I'm trying to make it better. But we struggle.
That's a great Maj. We'll have to talk some more about Maj. It's just funny. He's been on my mind lately because he was on the cover of one of the magazines that I stock in stores. He's just been on my mind. We will come right back here after the top of the hour and continue the conversation. Sharpe on Toward Anarchy.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network because you can handle the truth.
It's a two-cigar day up in here. We're off into hour number 2, and my guest today is Larry Sharpe. And just before we went into the break, he had mentioned Maj Touré. And Maj, if you don't know who he is, he's the founder of Black Guns Matter. And I'm a silly, skinny little white boy, and nothing warms my heart more than when I'm out on the street and I see a black man open and carrying a firearm and choosing to defend himself, because I understand the history in America, and I understand the history of disarming the black man. It's just one of those things that I always make it a point to thank people in general who open carry, but when I see a black man who open carries, it's not uncommon here in Topeka. It may be less common where Larry's at there in New York, though.
Oh my God, no, you don't. You do not want New York City. Oh my God, in New York State, the Second Amendment is the second suggestion. That's what it is, and I hate to say it, but it is. New York City, I'm not even joking, if you bring your legally owned, legally purchased firearm into New York City, and as you bring it through in an airport, like you're changing from JFK to go someplace else, and you follow every single TSA guideline, we will put you in jail. I'm not joking. If you think I'm making that up, you can check the data. That actually happens every year. We put you in jail, and we put you in the most violent jail in the country, Rikers Island. That's what happens. So, yes, that's not how it works here in New York City at all. But again, I'll go back to, the idea. You're talking about history. You're talking about how good and bad it is. And when I bring it up is I say, look in your neighborhood. How fast do the cops come? And they're like, what? Yeah. What the cops are doing is they're going to clean up and do a report. And then maybe they'll find the guy who did it. Maybe. And if they do, he'll go back to jail for his third time and he'll be out soon. So what actually happened? I said, not just that. Think about this. Who are the people who are actually, not including gangbangers, who are the people in tough, poor, brown and black communities who are actually getting mugged? Little old lady, the single mom with 2 kids, the little old man. That's who's getting beaten up. Imagine if they had a firearm. Just have one old man draw down on a thug. Changes the entire dynamic. What the firearm actually is an equalizer. And when I talk about it like that, you hear people go, oh, huh. And again, everything I talk about, and you hear it in my language, I don't talk about rights. People don't like that. It doesn't feel good. I bring up the rights part after. I first talk about the emotion, and then I talk about the rights part. And they go, yeah, oh, that's why the Second Amendment exists. Yeah, see? That's why it exists, because of that. And then they go, oh, I have a new respect for the actual amendment. And that's what I'm trying to achieve. So I try to touch it always from the part of, how do I solve a current problem with someone right now? If you ask the average New Yorker about taxation, we were on taxation earlier, and I talk about taxation, and they go, "Oh yeah, taxes. It's they're high, but it's the only way you can have a society. Who will build the roads and all these types of things?" And then I come up with an idea on how you can get the roads built without paying taxes. And I said, "Well, imagine who's filling potholes right now?" And they say, "Who?" I said, "Well, not Taco Bell, Domino's Pizza." Domino's. They go, "They are?" I go, yeah. So what they do is they fill the holes because their drivers are going on the roads and they're beating up their cars. So they want to fix the roads. And they go, oh, that sounds cool. I said, what if I told Domino's, here's how you fix the roads. If you want to fix the roads, go ahead. And every time you put a pothole, put your Domino's logo on it. And they will go, great. And they start doing it. What would happen? Well, McDonald's wants that. Papa John's wants that. Burger King wants that. Taco Bell wants that. All of a sudden, they all want that same thing. And I go, guys, don't fight over this. How about instead, we already have a adopt a highway for littering. Why don't we adopt a road for maintenance? And you know what? McDonald's, you get this road. Pizza, you get that road. Boom, we get that. And you guys get your names on the roads, and you can all start fixing the roads. And, of course, the pushback I get, which is immediately, well, then they won't want to fix it in the poor neighborhoods. And I said, well, I don't know. I think poor people also like pizza and hamburgers. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're right. And they won't want to go to the poor neighborhoods. And what I say is, hold on, let me finish my point real fast.
Okay.
And what I say is, I'm not getting rid of the people who fix the roads. So if there are any left over, they get to fix the other roads. The poor people get a better service. They still get their roads fixed, even if it isn't by them. And if we get enough of them fixing the roads, we can let the people go who are working for the city. And who will they be picked up by? They'll be picked up by Taco Bell and Burger King because they people know how to fix roads. So we don't lose the jobs. We just stop paying the taxes.
Well, it's funny that you put it that way, because that same person in the conversation they were having with the other guy just a few minutes ago was talking about how McDonald's are all in the poor neighborhoods.
Yeah, there we go. Yes, exactly right. Yes. But again, I don't fight them on that. I give them the emotion. Right? I give them the emotion. They want to make poor people happy, it's fine. I talked another one about, how do we deal with our bridges in New York State? I said, why is a bridge named after some politician? Why isn't it instead named, we're going to name the bridge the Verizon Bridge, the 3M Bridge. Yeah. We'll do that instead. And what will happen is, this is New York City. New York City has over a dozen bridges and tunnels just in New York City, and they're crossed by hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, every single day. And they're mentioned hundreds of times on the radio during the traffic reports every single day. And people do all types of movies and TV shows and such. You get product placement for free, all of that. You tell me you wouldn't pay $100 million a year for that? Of course you would. You pay $100 million a year because you pay $20 million a year for a stadium that's used on the weekends. Right. So you'll pay $100 million for a bridge. Well, what happens? Well, you put as part of that, they're in charge of maintenance. We still inspect the bridges, and if the bridges aren't up to speed, then they lose the contract. Well, they're not going to lose the contract, so they're going to keep the bridge up. So now the bridge maintenance is paid, plus we're getting $100 million. So guess what I can do? Get rid of tolls. I can get rid of tolls. Tolls in New York City are up to $18 to cross one bridge. Yes, $18 to cross one bridge. And I say, who pays? I tell people, who pays to cross that bridge? Not the wealthy. The wealthy already live in Manhattan.
Yep.
Everyone else crosses. You want to make the poor feel better? Take away their $18 to cross a bridge to go to work. And again, now I'm hitting them where they want to get hit. I don't talk about libertarian. I talk about other ways of raising money other than taxation. And before you know it, they stop thinking that taxation is the only answer.
Well, I think it's great, because what you're saying here, and it just goes along with a lot of what I've been talking about lately, and just this idea of the emotional response and how to deal with it and how to get past it. That's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about dealing with the emotional response, not avoiding it, and then getting into the logic and reason behind it. And the labels, the labels, they come and go, but the ideas behind the solid, provable work behind an idea will still be there.
Yes, absolutely, yes. I completely agree. So I think when we're talking to, poorer neighborhoods, when we're talking to people of color, when we're talking to brown, black, and immigrant communities, we've got to, speak in a way that they understand. We've got to use phrases that they get. We've got to be able to go to where they are. And we haven't been good at it. I haven't either. And one of the reasons why I haven't is when it comes to left and right and libertarians, as a general rule, if people are more on the right, they're more open to yell at you and try to own you. If they're on the left, they're more open to just completely dismiss you and get rid of you. It's a different way of handling them. So it's harder to get people from the left because so many times they don't want to engage. They don't want to talk. People from the right will talk. At least they may yell at you, but at least they'll talk. So I actually find myself getting people from the right easier than from the left. The left, the advantage of getting people from the left is when someone comes from the left, man, they are in. They are in. If you get someone who was, say, a hardcore socialist and you get that person to become a libertarian, they are the greatest advocate you could ever find. They are an activist that will never stop. They are really on board when they get on board.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see that in any immigrant, any migrant that has come to America from a socialist, communist country and saying, what the hell are you people talking about?
Yes.
Turning this, you're crazy.
Yes. And I think even for American, particularly if you find a lot of young people who socialism to them, again, I was a Marine in the 80s. I still remember the Soviet Union, right? So socialism and communism to me has a very different feeling than some 20-something.
Empire.
Yes. Ronald Reagan was literally my first commander-in-chief. So, yes, absolutely. I get it. It's how I feel. But when you find someone who's 20-something, they see socialism as, cool Uncle Bernie or hot AOC. They just don't have the same emotion to it. But when you get them to see it for what it is, man, are they amazing activists. It just takes more time. People say, Larry, how do you handle that? And I say, patience, patience, and more patience.
Yeah, you know what? And that seems to strike some chord of sense with me that they would, because you're conservative, you're right-leaning individual. They're corporate businesses, jobs. They're live and let live. Whereas you're left, they tend to be the ones that want to, at least they say they want to, whether they actually ever get out there and do it or not, want to change things from the ground up. They're the ones that that are often talking about getting back to sort of a natural state of things. I think the agorist, if you will, if we're talking about sort of voluntarist, libertarian, anarchist terms, the agorist tends to lean left. And by left, I think, for me, I tend to believe in their understanding of economics, not their understanding of a voluntary communal community.
Well, I think, the idea, and I bring this up often, remember something, in a libertarian society, socialists can survive.
Absolutely.
In a socialist society, world, libertarians can't. Right? It's a difference. You can have the Amish in a libertarian world, right? I mean, they're voluntary socialists. Okay, great. Go on the commune if you want to, man. Good on you. And if you want to leave, leave. Good on you. Be who you want to be. I bring this up for New York State specifically because New York State is a grossly diverse state. I mean, so diverse, and I love it. We have a county in New York State that has 4,500 people in it total. In Queens, that's like 5 blocks. Queens has 2.1 million, and Hamilton County has 4,500. That's how diverse we are in New York State. And many states have that, but New York State has huge chunks of diversity throughout it. In fact, Queens County is the most diverse state in the country, the most diverse county in the entire country. So why do I say that? Because if we're going to love diversity, and we say we do, and I'm in, let's love diversity. I'm in. Okay. What that means is, why would you want to have a one-size-fits-all answer from your capital city? It makes no sense. If you actually believe in diversity, and I hope you do, then you should believe in as much localization as you can possibly get. You should believe in to hopefully at one point down to the individual, but I'll take county for now. Let me take county, and then we'll go down to the individual. But I've got to turn the country around. If people aren't noticing this, the country is not facing towards freedom. It's facing towards oligarchy and dictatorship. That's where it's facing. And it's walking strictly towards it. Remember something, last year, and still now, but it began last year, the vast majority of Americans had to wake up in the morning, either turn their computer on or their phone or their TV, and see if the government was going to allow them to go to work. Mm-hmm. That never happened before, but that's where we are now. And the saddest part of that, I'm not actually upset that that happened. I'm upset that the vast majority of Americans were like, okay, yeah, we're good with this. That's the worst part. That most Americans are like, yeah, that's fine. Okay, I'll wait until my Lord and Master tells me if I'm essential or not. Okay, otherwise I'll stay home like he tells me to. That's what we're doing.
That kills a libertarian. It just really is an icicle to the heart, because it's that idea that most people, well, it's what you started the conversation with, and that's what we fool ourselves into believing as anarchists and libertarian, is that most people want to be free, and I don't think that that's really true. I don't think, for the most part, that most people don't really understand what it means to be free. I think their vision of what freedom is actually very cloudy.
Absolutely, you're totally correct. And this is why my conversations are, my goal is not, I know this is going to make some libertarians unhappy. My goal, my personal goal, is not to make America free. That isn't my goal. My goal is to turn America towards freedom. If I just turn us in the right direction, then we'll start walking. And if we just go towards that direction, now we can fix our country. And some people aren't going to want to go all the way. But that's okay. Because if we just get to a point where we understand that you should be able to be as liberal or as conservative as you want to be, just don't force your views on others, then some people will voluntarily say, you know what, I'm good right here. But Michael, you want to keep going? Go, brother, on you. You keep going. I'm going to stay right here. And you go, good, you stay there. Good for you, man. And you keep going. And we're not there.
No. And it seems, I don't know, I hate saying it, but it kind of seems like we get further and further from it. It's a weird thing, because it's certainly true of the system, and it's so hard. You have to work really hard to separate the system from the individuals. And so what I see from individuals on the street is a want and a need for liberty, but I don't see that realized within the system.
Yes, the systems are set not for that, right? And that's what I talk about. I always talk about the system. How do we make things better? Right? I actually did, if anybody cares, I actually put together 10 videos on how to handle the COVID crisis back last March. Now it's almost a year old. You can go to the Sharpe YouTube page, and it's 10 videos, each is about 10, 15 minutes long. And I discuss exactly what we should have done and how we should have dealt with it. And of course, none of it was forced, and none of it included more taxation, because none of my policies ever include those two things. And when people now see it from back then, they start going, wow, Larry, that was the right answer. Yeah, I know it was the right answer. I gave the vaccine the way to put the vaccines out. I put my plan out in October on how we should do it. And I do my show every day from around 7 p.m. Eastern every day, and I literally put out, here's how we get the vaccines out. And I gave the answer. And you know what's happening now? We're now doing my answer.
Well, and that's a big deal when you're talking about the fact that you're there in New York, because just here the last week or so, it's been, well, I mean, you and I, we know, the people that are listening to this show know that it's been a big problem all along, but all of a sudden here in the last week, it's come out. One of his close advisors, one of Cuomo's advisors, has come out and talked about how they hid some numbers about the nursing homes because they didn't want the Department of Justice and Trump getting a hold of those numbers, and just a big to-do, of course. So, yeah.
Address him appropriately. He is His Majesty King Andrew Cuomo II. All hail the king.
Oh, did you catch the thing about who was it? Florida Governor Steve
DeSantis.
Yeah, DeSantis. Did he tell the president to go F himself this week?
Yeah, because he doesn't. Look, this is the thing I'll give, and not that I'm a huge Florida fan or not a fan of Florida, but here's the data that is clear. Florida has more people than we have in New York. It has a higher number by percentage and total of elderly people than we have in New York. It has half of our budget that we have in New York, and it had less cases and less deaths.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So they're doing something right. Less cases, less deaths, with more people, half the budget, and more elderly people by both percentage and total numbers. And they only had one minor short lockdown period. Otherwise, they were open.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's
Yes.
just the whole. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. You coined it perfectly. I thought COVID crash response.
Yes. Oh, remember something. COVID does hurt and kill people. That's true. And most of the people who hurts and kills are those who are elderly with a pre-existing condition. That's true. COVID doesn't shut a business down. COVID doesn't get rid of my job. COVID doesn't keep my kid home from school. That takes government to make that dumb mistake. That takes government to crush that. Not
and
COVID.
they did it. They went all out on it.
Absolutely.
This last year.
100%.
We're going into a break. We got to come back, and we're going to wrap this thing up with Larry Sharpe right here on Toward Anarchy. If you go to YouTube.com and you look for the Sharpe Way, Sharpe with an E, you'll see 160,000, 170,000 subscribers. You're successful in the social media. What do you have to say? We're just about out of time. Just a few more minutes with you. What do you have to say about what's happening across the social media right now with the sort of seeming attack on right-leaning speech, on freedom-loving speech?
We are destroying ourselves for no reason whatsoever, right? It doesn't even do what the person wants, right? The example I'll give you is the Star Wars actor that was recently that was recently fired. Right? If you don't like what she says, and I get if you don't like it, I understand that. People don't like stuff. Okay. But do you think that if you get rid of her and cancel that, all of a sudden she's going to say, oh, well, you know what? Now I'm a Democrat. That's not going to happen, right? If that was going to happen, at least I could understand your momentum. But you're basically saying, I'm mad, be quiet. When you cut out a man's tongue, you haven't made what he said wrong. You've just shown the world that you don't want to hear it. And that's what they're doing. They're showing that they don't want to hear what she has to say. Not that she's wrong or has no right. And here's the worst part. If I actually don't like what she has to say and I want to change it, if I cancel her, does she change it? Does she go, oh, no, but if I keep talking to her, maybe she might look my way and think I'm right. But if I don't actually think that she'll ever change, or I don't want her to change, or I just want an enemy, then I try to cancel her.
Well, she's an interesting study in this particular question because I was talking about her earlier before you joined the program because I'm a fan of the show, and so I've been following it, and I brought it up with my listener some time ago that she was being hounded by these social justice warriors, whatever, chasing her around trying to get her fired, and so it's culminated in this. Her views are sort of pretty standard, acceptable, kind of middle of the road. Anyways,
I agree. She's not even close. I bring up on purpose because you said that. She's not some person saying QAnon is going to take over the world. She's not even there. Yeah. She's not there. And this was too much for them. Yeah. But even if you don't like QAnon, you think QAnon's evil or bad, it does. If you cancel the QAnon people, they don't all of a sudden become non-QAnon. Either way, conversation is the only answer, whether you like what they're saying or not. And that if you tell the QAnon member, hey, I don't like what you're saying, but let's keep talking, well, then maybe you might understand where they're coming from. And that's a more important piece than anything.
Isn't it, though? This is something that we seriously lack in communication right now, is empathy for the other individual. And it's, I don't know how many times it can be repeated over and over again to somebody to try to put yourself in the shoes of the individual that you're talking to, if just for a second.
Yes. What I do often is I talk to people who get angry at people who want things like UBI, as you mentioned. And I say, please, whoever you are now, whoever you are, imagine for a moment if you had never seen your parents go off to work your entire life. You'd never seen your mom or dad go off to work. And then imagine your parents had never seen their parents go off to work, ever. And you had never seen your grandparents go off to work. You just had never seen that happen. Whoever you are now, you'd be a different person. Guaranteed, you would be a different person. And me just saying that, I hope, makes other people think, you know what? Yeah, I would think differently about stuff. And maybe I'd have to be talked to. And maybe I'd have to have some empathy for where I'm coming from before I can move my opinion. And I bring that up because where I grew up in the South Bronx, I know people exactly like that who had never seen their parents go off to work ever.
Really?
Yes. It is a different way of looking at life. It's a different expectation of life. It's a different way of looking at everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's all I knew.
Yes.
That's all I knew. I was a latchkey kid. I was a definition
Me too.
of somebody. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm with you, brother. But I'm saying, imagine if you had never seen that. I don't know who you'd be, but it wouldn't be this person now.
I can actually kind of think and look at maybe, some of the people that I've come across in my life and think, I might be that person.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. And unfortunately, we're just about out of time. The music's going to kick on any second here. Please, feel free to pitch anything that you're up to, any sites you want anybody to visit.
Guys, please check me out on The Sharpe Way. It is my podcast. It's a video live podcast. It's almost every day, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can do whatever you like. Come talk to me. I'm here. I'm happy to do it. Reach out to me on The Sharpe Way Properties or Larry Sharpe. I'm trying to make more people understand our way. And if you can come and help me, I could use the help.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad I got a chance to talk with you. Like it was one of those things where we're all doing our thing, and we all have what we think we need to do and what we think we should be talking about and the things that we should be working for. And it helps to try to put yourself in those shoes like we were talking about of the other person. And so that's what I did. I went to my fans and listeners and friends and in the social media, and I said, Who am I not talking to yet? What am I not talking about? Where should it be? And your name kept coming up every time that I've done that. So I really appreciate you taking the time, my friend.
There's another piece I want to bring up if I could.
Look
at what your skill sets are, and anyone listen, if you're listening, look at what your skill sets are and what you're passionate about, and realize that you don't have to be everything in our movement. Be the thing that you're good at in our movement.
Thank you. I love that.
Are you good at teaching? Are you good at motivating? Are you the guy who yells cessation of step that gets those people coming? Whoever you are, be that person. Yes.
Thank you, Larry Sharpe. Thank you.
Public Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
SportAnarchy.com, that's the best place to follow along. As always, everything is centered right there. I put the energy, the effort into that little spot right there that I do just to make it as easy as possible on you. Simple links, not a lot of flash, just to get where you're going, get there. Find what you're looking for. In this case, you're looking for February 14th. You see Larry Sharpe was my guest. What an amazing conversation. It was great getting a chance to talk to him. Everybody that suggested that I needed to speak with him, that I needed to have him on the show, was absolutely correct. He just really fun to talk to, and I really liked that at the end there, his idea of just not trying to be everything. These activists, these people within the liberty movement, the anarchists, the libertarians, the voluntarists, whatever, the agorists, whatever you call yourself, whatever you're doing for liberty, you can't do it all. Pick your thing. That's not the same as stay in your lane. That's not what either of us was trying to say. It's just about picking that thing that you're good at and doing it and pointing that, steering that in the direction of liberty. It doesn't matter what it is. You can be an artist, and the work that you do can be creatively, consciously aware, conscious creation. We were talking about last week on the show with Todd Borrow. Just this idea that what you're doing can be directed and faced towards liberty. Larry mentioned that the nation itself, the political system, the people, it's all pointed towards totalitarianism, to socialism, and not the good kind, not the kind where you're participating because you want to. For those of you who think that it's something that it hasn't been realized yet. Oh, well, you haven't. It's not real communism. You can make the same arguments about capitalism, except that you can't. Capitalism has produced wealth and has produced many great deal of things. I think even But was it Todd that brought it up last week? It was is to sort of take the comparisons of just the time during the Cold War of that sort of socialist communist regime and reality that existed during the Cold War versus America, and look at the difference in the things that came out of it. You know, look at the growth of everybody within the nation, as opposed to just a subset of people, certain classes of people. Everybody has generally been raised out of poverty in America. Even the poorest of people aren't as poor as they are everywhere else, and that's due directly to capitalism. And those who would argue that it's not, I would say to you that it is actually socialism, the communism, the people that want more when they see that somebody has more than they have, whether they even realize it or not, or whether they see that somebody has more than somebody else has, you know, a third party. They're the ones that are pushing that, pushing us in that direction, away from the capitalist society that actually created, and that because we still share that same general concept that we as individuals have the right to determine our own future. We're not forced into choosing jobs. We don't have there's relative class division, of course, but generally speaking, just about anyone here can do anything. Anybody can become anything they want. You can grow up to be anything you want, and that's interesting for me to say, because I thought about that earlier this week, in this notion of the difference between what when I was told that I could be anything I want versus when I am telling somebody that they can be anything they want. When I was told that I could be anything I want, sort of 35 years or so ago, I just turned 48, so we're talking, you know, as a youngin', and growing up and trying to decide who and what I wanted to be, of course I was told I could be anything I want, but it was inside this weird bubble of who people are. So when I was told that I could be anything that I want, those things were predefined. Anything you want was you grow up, be a white heterosexual male, get married, you know, find a job, you know, as a manager someplace. Those sorts of things. They were very. It seems so limiting to me, looking back on it, than now, or at least the way when I say that my children can grow up to be anything they want to be. I literally mean it. If they want to grow up to be an international spy, more power to them. I literally, you know, nothing is off the table when it comes to me saying you can grow up to be anything you want, except that you have to do so sort of voluntarily. You know, you have to, the people that you interact with and the way that you interact with them has to be a quid pro quo thing. They have to want to interact with you and do the things that you want to do with them. If you're violating people for any reason, then I'm going to have a problem. But what you do, who you are, that's the only restriction that I put on you. And that's the only restriction that I've ever put on my children, is that they have to leave other people and their stuff alone, that everything else is fair game. They can do really whatever they want to do with themselves and their lives. And it just seemed to me, thinking about that this week, that it was so much different when I say it than when it was said to me. It was wholeheartedly meant, but I think that the people who said it to me, aside from, you know, one or two of them along the way, these ones would have been a little bit later when I was actually me and already knew who I was. Generally speaking, their vision of the world is a pretty small bubble. In you know, I was encouraged to play an instrument, but I wasn't encouraged to be a rock star. But, they didn't tell me that I could be a rock star. I could be anything I wanted. I could play an instrument, but I played trumpet. They didn't run right out and buy me an electric guitar. That's something I had to pick up and teach myself years and years later. And I wish I had. I wish that would have been an option. I wish that it wouldn't have been like, oh, well, you can be a musician, but you have to be in the Denver Symphony Orchestra. That's who you have to go. You're not going to be one of those rock star guys. Not that anybody ever said that, but they didn't explicitly. It wasn't. I wasn't supposed to even be thinking of that. There was. Why would he be thinking of that? He's computers and art and instruments and the band type instruments. I was in band and. So it's just a different. It was just an interesting thought that I had come across my mind earlier in this week. I'm glad that it came up just to be able to talk about it, because I think it's a much different world than the one I grew up in, and there's a lot of good in it and there's a lot of bad in it. I guess we just have to keep having these conversations over and over again and really concentrate on the things that bring us to those good outcomes, those positive results, because they're not tied into an ideology. They're more like tied into a lack of ideology and just a notion of letting people be free and letting them grow up and be who they want to be. That's why we had the conversation with Lenore Skenazy here a couple of weeks ago, and Dana Martin will be on the show coming up next week. February 21st is activist John Bush. That's going to be another one of these great conversations that we get to have. And then I'm hoping the end of the month it'll be Jamie Brown. I haven't confirmed with him yet, but he's the lead singer of Roxanne. And I'll play some rock and roll. We'll do some music, and we'll listen to some of their maybe some of the newest, earliest. I don't know if we could do that. But they are actually in the process of recording an album. Right? It's kind of funny because right at the end of December, they're not big on the social media. They're not just up there. Jamie's not just posting constantly, but they posted something on their Facebook page about third day of recording already, and that was right at the end of December, and then didn't hear anything from them. Nothing popped up on the page for another month, and then I wrote to Jamie and I said, hey, what's going on? You want to be on the show again? You want to do another show? And we'll do things a little differently this time. We'll talk. We'll do a little less rock radio sort of interview, and we'll just have more of the casual conversation like I do with these other people. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. We just got done with COVID. The whole band, I guess all of them caught COVID all right at that time, around that last post. And so for the last month, they've been dealing with the flu, the COVID, the coronavirus, the whatever. They were sick, and they're over it, and they're all better now, and it doesn't seem like there's any long-lasting effects. And so hopefully, end of the month, the 28th, the last day of February here, we'll have a conversation with Jamie Brown. But definitely next week, John Bush. And you go to towardanarchy.com, and you can see that. It's listed there on the upcoming on the front page. If you're there, if you do visit the site, make sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever you're listening to us on, wherever the platform is. I'm playing with the website a little bit here and there all the time. I added this flashing T-shirt picture over here on the side of the website so that I would remember to just drop it in there. I don't have to harp on it. I don't have to, just shove it down your throat. But you click on that link, and it'll take you to a page that suggests that you might click one more link and buy a T-shirt from me. And that'll help support the show. It's just a simple little thing like that to where I can just quickly mention it and move on, because I'm working down here on all these other buttons and playing with these things and trying to make it so it's a little bit more accessible to smaller devices, handheld devices, and it's been a slow process without making them all look the same or making my website look like every single other website that's out there. It's all that artist thing and trying to deal with that mentality that nags at the back of the mind as you're presenting something when you are somebody who is particular or somebody who is artistic and you want it to be as good as it can be, but you also I threw up a page within a matter of a couple of minutes because they reached out to me sort of on a Wednesday and said, hey, you want to take a Sunday show, a couple hours, and start doing a show again? And boom, just like that, I was jumping in. So you've got to watch over as it's developed, and it's been fun for me to be able to talk about how it's gone because I've been able to do things to present a message and to put myself out there and to put the show out there, and along with it, the network and the ideals and ideas that come with it all out there. I've been successful at it. While you may argue that there's not anybody going and necessarily typing in toward anarchy in a search engine, but the point is that if you do type it in, you get me. You get this show, you get this network, you get these ideas of freedom. And so it's still possible, even in Google. It took a year. I beat it up. Pandora, beat it up. All of these places, just a little bit. And doing it all on my own and just learning as I go along and picking up these little techniques and these ways to manipulate these search engines and to get yourself the best possible appearance to get your message across. And so the whole thing has been awesome to be able to share in such an open forum like this. And I like that you share it with me, and I see the people buying the T-shirts and supporting, and I see the links and the numbers of people every month that show up at the website and download the show, and it just blows my mind, and I appreciate it. And I'll continue to do the best I can to bring you these voices and reach out and to grab somebody like a Larry Sharpe and bring them onto the show. Or John Bush, he's coming up next weekend. If you don't know John Bush, he's an anarchist, voluntarist, agorist, somebody who is working with Derek Bros and many of the people who listen to the network are down in and around the area where the network is at and are familiar with people like Derek Bros and John Bush. So that's going to be another one of these fantastic conversations. It'll be great to be able to bring to you and share with you because of just there's so much relevance for these people and their ideas across the board. But when it's somebody like John or Derek Bros that's right there in your backyard, right there where the voices across Republic Broadcasting Network originate, as it were, certainly as a network, as the team that we are, it's really cool to be able to participate in that. And it was one of the things that frustrated me about trying to get some of the political candidates this past cycle onto the show. One of the things that really frustrated me with them was they would be somewhere or doing something that is particular to the audience or to the network, and I'm like waving a flag in front of their face and say, here, there's these people over here that I have all these thousands of people that listen every week, and they tune in and they support the network and they support this show and they support these ideas in proved by the fact that they support the network in this show, and your voice needs to be here and needs to be talking to them because they might even vote for you. There's that possibility they might vote for you. So that was really frustrating dealing with. Okay, so I mentioned when I was talking to Larry earlier, we talked about Maj Touré, and the Black Guns Matter, and it just came up, and it was right at the end of a break or going right into a break when I first said anything about it, and I mentioned about it. He was on the cover of which magazine is it? It's not coming to me. off the top of my head, and there's a reason for that. It's because I set magazines. It's one of the things that I do is I set magazines, and I put them out, and I see him on the cover of, I can't picture shooter, I don't know. But I mentioned the thing about magazines, and that might have thrown somebody off or left that hanging out open there. But actually, it's kind of interesting. It's neat. I put out all the weeklies, so I put out the Inquirer and the Globe and stuff like that, and I get to see all of these political things. And one of the funny things that's happened here in Kansas is I'm all over the greater Topeka area of north, south, east, west, all the different stores that I'm setting the magazines in. And in every single one of them, I find a sort of different response to the Biden and Harris being put on various magazine covers because they were running for the presidency and running up to it, and then of course they've apparently won the presidency, and so they're all these magazine covers, and it just amazes me. It's different. You can tell when people just pick up a magazine and drop it in another spot and it doesn't belong there. These are actually sort of taken and turned around and pushed to the back, and just anything that they can do to just sort of push their faces away from it. It's just sort of a funny psychological thing that I'm noticing in my job that I do every day. And somebody even pointed it out to me at one point. It had to really clarify right away that they didn't care about either way, whether it was Obama or Biden or Trump or whoever, because Obama and his wife had been on covered 2 months ago or 3 months ago, something like that. Of course, they're popular people. It's all another interesting thing about putting out those magazines, and it's wonderful because I like the fact that people read. I should read more myself. We probably should all read a little more ourselves. But just seeing the types of things that people are talking about and people are interested in, and that come in print, it's an interesting world and things that go on in it, and there's a lot of waste and a lot of money that's just thrown away, and a lot of reading material that could be given or donated to people. It's an interesting thing. It's something fun that I'm learning about. Next week, activist John Bush is on the show, so join us then, and until then, you take care.